Pop quiz. What's the most expensive part about owning rental properties? Is it A, maintenance? Is it B, insurance? Is it C, taxes? Or is it D, turnover? The answer is D, turnover. You may or may not know it, but turnover, when a tenant leaves your property and you have to get a new tenant in place, is by far the most expensive part about owning rental property. Whether you don't own any rental properties yet, or you own a few but aren't cash flowing as much as you thought, this video is going to help you out, because I'm going to talk about the top 5 ways to limit turnover so you cash flow more. My name is Sam, and I'm here to help you control your life using real estate. First, let's talk about why turnover is the most expensive part about owning rental properties, and then let's get into those 5 tips that will help you limit that so you make a lot more cash. Turnover is super expensive for several reasons. First, you're not collecting any rent when there's no tenant in place. So if a tenant leaves at the very end of the month, it is extremely unlikely or impossible to have a new tenant move in that very next day. So best case scenario, 30 to 45 days later, a new tenant will move in if you're starting to screen tenants even before the old tenant moves out, or you start the process right after the old tenant moves out. It takes time to get applications, make sure the property's cleaned up, pass any inspections, ready to go. That takes some time. And in those 30 to 45 days, you still have to pay your mortgage, you still have to pay your insurance, you still have to accrue for taxes, you still have expenses that are having to be paid every month, but you're not collecting any rent for that short period of time, albeit it's still a period of time where you're not collecting any rent. That's the best case scenario, and depending on how much rent you're getting, I would say that would be $1,000 to $1,500. But on average, most tenants leave after a year or two that most people have the property rented to them. The house is in decent condition, or the apartment's in decent condition, but not great. So maybe you go after the tenant for a couple things that they did to their property, but there's probably deferred maintenance. You got to get some contractors in there. You got to pay for a few things yourself, and you're not collecting rent while you're doing all of this. So on average, I would say it's probably more like $2,000 to $3,000 every single time a tenant moves out, obviously depending on your area or how much rent you collect. Obviously, worst case scenarios we're not going to get into are more than that. But that's $2,000 to $3,000 coming out of your pocket. You can accrue for some of that, meaning every month you put a little bit of money away so when the tenant moves out, you're ready for that. We suggest doing that with the vacancy part of the cash flow formula. However, if you can limit the times that people are moving out of your properties, you will limit those $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 hits. In a 10-year span, if you have a tenant leave maybe once or twice, meaning every 5-ish years, you're getting a new tenant in place and having to kind of swallow that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, that's not too bad, as opposed to what a lot of people do and tenants stay for a year or two, and in that 10-year period, 5 separate times you're moving a tenant in and out. So even if the tenant's been there shorter and didn't do as much damage, best case scenario, it's still probably $1,000 to $2,000 every year, every other year, as opposed to maybe a little bigger chunk because the tenant's been there longer, just one time. I don't know the exact formula, I don't know that it's out there, but from my experience, I bet that you can double or triple your cash flow in a decade on one property by not having tenants move out as much. Just makes everything easier. So now that you hopefully kind of have an understanding of why turnover costs so much, let's talk about ways to limit that turnover, limit your exposure, and put more money in your pocket, as well as have a much better experience owning rental properties. Here are the 5 reasons. Number 1 starts before you even move the tenant in, and that is screening tenants properly and taking your time approving tenants. Most landlords don't spend a ton of time approving tenants. If a tenant meets this criteria on income and their credit score is decent, they approve them. And that's usually when you run into issues, because there are a lot of really, really, really good tenants out there. There's more good tenants than good landlords out there, but you have to do a little more time up front to find the right tenant for you and the right tenant for your property. We take a lot of time. We probably deny maybe 5 to 15 applications before we approve one, but we go way deeper than that. Even if it takes us another 3-4 weeks to find the right tenant, that's a home run for us, because they're not going to move out for 3, 4, or 5 years, as opposed to most people, if they can fog a mirror and they make decent money, they just approve them. But there's so much more that goes into it. We call their past landlords. We obviously run a credit check. We run a criminal history. We look at their income. We look at their spending habits of their bank statements. We do a deep dive on them. Obviously, they know we're doing all that. They're giving us permission to do it, but we spend a lot of extra time, and sometimes it's kind of annoying because it's like, this property is a great property. It's been on the market for 3-4 weeks and we haven't gotten an approved application. But then I look at the long game and understand that if we spend a little more time getting a great tenant in place and do our due diligence up front, they are going to stay a lot longer and it's going to be a lot less headaches on us as well. Number 2, communicate and set the proper expectations. I can't tell you how many times I've seen other property management companies, their processes, and they simply meet at the property and get the lease signed and they leave and they spend 5 minutes. We do not do that. We set the expectation as we're talking to the tenants through the approval process. Once they're approved, we meet them at their current property that they're living in to see how they are actually taking care of that property, a real life example. And it kind of allows us, they know we're coming to see how they're living, and that's the last little box we check. If we go there and everything's great, then we're like, all right, we're good. Last box was checked, let's sign the lease now. And at that time, we set all the expectations. Here's clearly what the lease states you need to take care of, Mr. or Mrs. Tenant. Here's clearly what the lease states that we need to take care of. We will do our part, and we please hope and ask that you do your part. If not, then this just turns into a messy situation for both of us. So we communicate throughout the entire pre-approval and approval and then post-approval process, but we also set those clear expectations in a nice, firm way to the tenants throughout the whole process. Number 3, and this one's pretty darn important, is we treat tenants with respect. They're people, we're people. There are a lot of really crappy landlords out there that look at their tenants as, numbers on a spreadsheet and, oh, they can't make their rent this much, something's wrong with them, let's evict them right away. We respect them, and obviously if we have to do certain things, we will, but that's a worst case scenario. We treat them with respect, and for the most part, they do the same because they're kind of used to that rhetoric out there, landlords versus tenant, landlords are evil kind of thing. That's overplayed, but it's kind of accurate because there are a lot of bad landlords out there. There's slumlords that don't have any pride in ownership, that don't communicate or do anything I'm talking about here in this part of the video, but we do it. We treat them with respect, and most of the time it works out, but sometimes we get a little flack, but we just kind of take a deep breath. We're a professional company, we're professional landlords. We treat our tenants with respect and treat them fairly, and overall it makes a world of difference. Number 4, I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, but we do what we're supposed to do. If we say that you are going to get responded on your maintenance request within 24 hours, not that we're going to be out there in 24 hours if it's something super simple and we're busy, but within 24 hours, usually less, we respond to that maintenance request to let them know we saw it and are working on it and it will get scheduled soon. If we say that we're going to take care of a certain part of the property or we are going to do something in the lease, we do that. And it's kind of funny, if we do what we say we're going to do, the tenant tends to do what they say they're going to do more often than not, meaning our tenants are in charge of cutting their own grass. If we do everything in our own maintenance requests quickly, they're more likely to cut their grass because they're taking care of me, they're taking care of the property, I'll do my part. Same with snow removal. Our tenants shovel their own driveways. So our tenants have to do some maintenance upkeep on the property. There's certain things that they need to take care of, but there's certain deferred maintenance things that aren't their fault that happen over time, and we take care of those and we make sure they're living in a nice property. So we do what we're supposed to do. We kind of lead the way with that. They seem to follow. Number 5, we offer incentives for them to stay. Upon lease renewal, we will contact them 3 months before the lease is expiring, and we will offer them, maybe a gas gift card or other types of gift cards to incentivize them to stay. Obviously, if it's been a bad relationship and a bad fit, we don't offer them to come back, but a majority of our tenants are great and we want them to stay and they want to stay. I think our average tenant stays over 4 years, and we're hoping to get better at that. Our portfolio is only 7 years old, so we're getting better and we will continue to get better. But if we want them to stay, we do our best. We, say maybe, market rent has gone up this much. We're not going to bump you up that much. We'll slightly bump your rent and give you a gas gift card or something like that. And if they've enjoyed their experience with us over the past few years and we communicated properly, they're more likely to stay. Hence, I'm not spending as much money getting a new tenant and not collecting rent. So it all kind of seems to work out. This may sound simple, like duh, but it's not easy. All of those things I just talked about take time, they take effort, they take energy. It's kind of more of that long-term thinking. In the short term, you may be spending more time and not making quite as much money because you're not getting a tenant in place because you're taking longer to approve them. That's why most people don't do it. That's why if you do it, you'll be known as a great landlord and people will want to live in your properties. As I stated earlier, I believe this. There are more good tenants out there than good landlords. So if you're a good landlord and have built a great reputation and have a beautiful home, you will start to attract the best tenants and they'll be happy and you'll be happy. Less headaches on them, less headaches on you. You make more money and they're just happier and you're actually helping the community. It's not easy, but it is simple. It just takes a little bit of extra work, but it makes a lot of difference. And if all you're worried about is cash flow, which that shouldn't be all you're worried about, but if that's all you're worried about, you're gonna make more cash flow doing it. If you're like me and want to provide safe housing to the community, make the community better, and just overall help make an impact as well as cash flow, then this is the way to do it. If you're just worried about cash flow, this is still the way to do it. If you want to know a little more tactical ways to buy these rental properties at a discount without using any of your own money, click on the video above. It's a video where I talk and walk through a rental property that I bought without using any of my own money. It kind of has some before and after pictures in there, as well as shows you the real numbers so you can go out and do the exact same thing. So check that video out if you have any interest in that. If not, I'll see you on the next video. Hope you enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe and like button if you have not yet. See you on the next one.